My parents secretly drained my inheritance to fund my golden brother's life. So, when they hijacked my 18th birthday to celebrate him again, I blew out the candles, walked out the door, and built an exit plan that left my mother completely alone. My parents turned my 18th birthday into yet another victory lap for my golden child brother. So, I stared them dead in the eye, blew out my candles, grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, and walked out the front door. It was the last time they ever saw their perfect little family whole. I turned 18 on a rainy Saturday in March. That detail matters because my mother, Brenda, had been planning this party for 6 weeks. And when I say planning, I mean military-grade logistics. She had color-coordinated tablecloths, a Spotify playlist she actually asked me to help curate, and a massive, custom-ordered chocolate ganache cake from the expensive bakery downtown instead of the stale, plastic-tasting grocery store sheet cake she usually grabbed for me at the last minute. For the first time in my entire life, it genuinely felt like something inside that house was actually about me. I should back up and give you some context. My name is Ethan. I'm the younger of 2 brothers. My older brother, Liam, is 23. He just graduated from a top-tier university and has been the absolute center of gravity in our household since the day he was born. I don't say that with raging bitterness, okay, maybe a little bit of bitterness, but mostly, I say it because it is an unavoidable, undeniable fact. It is just like saying the sky is blue, or that my dad will inevitably fall asleep on the couch during any movie longer than 90 minutes. Liam was the kid who got the expensive private tutors, the elite travel baseball team that cost thousands a season, the premium SAT prep courses, and the cross-country college visits. I was the kid who got, "We'll figure yours out later, Ethan. Let's just get Liam settled first." And later, as you can probably guess, never really came. Here is the most complicated part of this whole dynamic. Liam isn't an inherently bad person. He is not some cartoon villain twirling his mustache and plotting my downfall. He is just a guy who grew up never once having to question whether the spotlight would find him, because our parents aggressively aimed it at him before he even had to ask. He is charming, talks easily, and gets along with everyone. People love Liam. I get it. I like Liam sometimes, too. But there is a massive, crushing difference between liking your brother and feeling like your parents view you as nothing more than the backup plan in case their masterpiece fails. My mom, Brenda, is the relentless engine behind all of it. She is the kind of mother who posts Liam's minor accomplishments on Facebook with 4 paragraphs of glowing, tear-jerking commentary, and posts my actual milestones with a generic thumbs-up emoji. She isn't intentionally cruel. She is just entirely convinced that Liam is her magnum opus, and I am the rough draft she unfortunately forgot to revise. My dad, Tom, is fully aware that this toxic imbalance exists. I've seen the guilt flash across his face 100 times. But Tom is the kind of guy who would rather eat a raw onion whole than have a single uncomfortable emotional conversation. So, he just keeps his head down, tinkers in the garage, and lets it ride. The only person in my entire bloodline who ever made me feel like I wasn't just a piece of background furniture was my Uncle Arthur. He is my dad's older brother, a gruff, no-nonsense guy who owns a mid-sized commercial HVAC and contracting company. He has this incredible way of saying exactly what he means without ever raising his voice. When I was 15, my parents skipped my regional science fair awards ceremony because Liam had a fraternity mixer the exact same weekend. Uncle Arthur drove an hour and a half in rush hour traffic just to sit in the audience. He didn't make a big, preachy speech about my parents failing me. He just showed up in his work boots, clapped louder than anyone else in the auditorium, and took me out for a massive steak dinner afterward. So, when my mom started meticulously planning this 18th birthday party, I made a fatal mistake. I let myself feel hope. Stupid, naive hope. She kept saying things like, "This is your special night, Ethan. I want this to be all about you." She even asked me for a guest list. I gave her a very short one: my girlfriend Chloe, a few close friends from school, Uncle Arthur, and the usual obligatory family members. But exactly 1 week before the party, the atmosphere in the house abruptly shifted. I noticed my mom pacing the kitchen, making hushed, excited phone calls. I saw a receipt for a second, much larger banner. Then, she pulled me aside and asked, "Ethan, honey, would you mind if Liam said a few words at dinner?" I asked her what he would possibly need to make a speech about at my birthday. She got this specific look on her face. It's the look she gets when she has already made a unilateral decision and is just performing the illusion of asking for my permission. Well, Liam just got some absolutely wonderful news about a massive job offer at a prestigious consulting firm. I just thought, since the whole family will already be gathered together. I stood there in the kitchen, gripping a cold glass of water, and felt that old, heavy, familiar weight settle deep into my chest. It wasn't even anger. It was pure, exhausting recognition. It's like when you see dark storm clouds rolling in, and you don't even bother rushing to bring the lawn chairs inside because you know everything is going to get soaked anyway. What is the point of fighting the weather? "Sure, Mom," I said, my voice entirely hollow. That's fine. It was absolutely not fine. The day of the party arrived. I put on a nice button-down shirt, tried to plaster a smile on my face, and walked downstairs to find our living room aggressively decorated. Half the room was themed for my 18th birthday. The other half was a shrine to Liam's corporate job announcement. Hanging right next to a modest banner that read Happy 18th, Ethan, was a massive, glittering sign that read Congratulations, Liam, future senior analyst. My mom had actually printed out a professional, glossy 8x10 headshot of Liam in his expensive interview suit, framed it in silver, and placed it directly on the food table, right next to my birthday cake. My girlfriend, Chloe, showed up early. She walked in, took one long, scanning look at the divided room, and then looked at me with eyes full of pity and quiet rage. She didn't say a single word. She didn't have to. My friends trickled in, looking equally confused. Uncle Arthur arrived carrying a small, heavy wrapped box. He scanned the room with the exact same disgusted expression Chloe had. He walked straight up to me, squeezed my shoulder hard enough to ground me, and muttered, "Happy birthday, kid, hang in there." Dinner was agonizing. The food was great, but the tension was suffocating. People made small talk. And then, right on cue, my mom stood up at the head of the table and aggressively clinked her wine glass with a spoon. I just want to take a moment to say how incredibly proud I am today. This is such a monumental day for our family, she beamed. She looked at me for a fraction of a second. "Ethan, happy 18th birthday, sweetheart, we love you so much." Pause. Big, theatrical smile. "And I also want to take a special moment to celebrate some absolutely incredible, life-changing news. Liam has officially accepted a position at Vance & Sterling. He will be starting as a senior analyst in June, making a fantastic salary." The entire room erupted into applause. My dad beamed with pride, practically glowing. Liam stood up, doing this sickeningly perfect, humble little wave he has perfected over his 23 years of existence. And then, my brother proceeded to give a staggering 4.5-minute speech about his personal journey, his career goals, his late-night study sessions, and how eternally grateful he was for our parents' unwavering financial and emotional support. 4.5 minutes, on my 18th birthday. I completely tuned him out and just watched my mother's face while Liam talked. She was absolutely glowing. It wasn't just the polite, happy glow of a mother sharing a nice family moment. It was the radiant, all-consuming glow of pure adoration. It was the exact look I had been desperately chasing for 18 years, a look that had never, not even once, been aimed in my direction. When Liam finally finished his self-indulgent monologue, the room cheered again. My mom rushed to the kitchen and brought out the cake. My birthday cake. Carried out immediately after Liam's triumphant speech, making it feel entirely like an afterthought. A consolation prize. She set it down in front of me, the candles illuminating her excited face, and said, "Make a wish, sweetheart." I sat there in the dim light. I looked at the 18 flickering candles. I looked at the framed, glossy photo of Liam's smiling face, sitting just 3 feet away from my cake. I looked at my mother, who was still visibly riding the euphoric high of Liam's big moment. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't make a wish. I just leaned forward and blew out the candles. Then, I calmly stood up, pushed my chair back, grabbed my denim jacket off the back of the seat, and walked straight toward the front door. I heard my mom gasp, "Ethan? Where are you going?" And then I heard my dad's gruff voice, "Just give him a minute, Brenda," which is classic Tom speak for, I absolutely refuse to deal with this emotional situation. I heard Chloe's chair scrape violently against the hardwood floor. I heard Uncle Arthur say something very low and very sharp to my dad that I couldn't quite make out. I didn't turn around. I didn't go back inside. I walked out into the cool night air and sat on the damp curb in front of our house, the jacket pulled in my lap, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel the burning sting of rejection. I just felt done. It was as if a heavy, rusted switch in my brain had permanently flipped. Whatever invisible, toxic cord had been keeping me tethered to that dining table, to that house, to that permanent second-place existence, had finally snapped in half. Chloe came outside a minute later and sat silently on the curb next to me. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" because she is smart enough to know I wasn't. She didn't say, "Let's go back inside and be the bigger person," because she knew I would rather swallow glass. She just leaned her head on my shoulder and asked, "What do you want to do?" And I finally said the words I had been quietly turning over in my mind for months. "I want to leave, Chloe." I didn't just mean I wanted to leave the party. Chloe drove me to her parents' house that night. I didn't go home. I pulled out my phone, texted my dad exactly 5 words. "I'm fine. Staying at Chloe's." Then, I powered the phone completely off. I didn't do it to be dramatic. I didn't do it to spark a manhunt. I just genuinely did not want to read whatever toxic, guilt-tripping garbage was inevitably coming my way. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and found exactly what I had anticipated. From Mom, "Ethan, that was incredibly immature and rude. You embarrassed me in front of the entire family. Everyone was staring. Not, are you okay? Not, I am so sorry the party didn't feel like yours. Just utter obsession with her own embarrassment. From Dad, call your mother. Now. From Liam, absolutely nothing, which honestly tracks perfectly. I legitimately don't think Liam even noticed I had walked out. He was probably still basking in the applause. I finally went home around noon on Sunday. My mom was sitting rigidly at the kitchen island, clutching a mug of coffee. When I walked through the door, she looked at me with the exact same expression you'd use if you found a stubborn stain on an expensive rug. Do you care to explain yourself? She demanded, her voice dripping with ice. Not really, I replied, keeping my voice entirely flat. Ethan, I put weeks of effort and hundreds of dollars into that party. The absolute least you could have done was stay and be supportive of your brother. I calmly set my house keys on the granite counter. It wasn't my party, Mom. It was Liam's corporate launch event, and you just happened to slap my name on a cake to save time. She did this infuriating thing where she closes her eyes, pinches the bridge of her nose, and exhales slowly, acting as if she is a saint dealing with an unruly toddler. We included Liam's announcement because the timing made sense with everyone gathered. That doesn't mean the party wasn't for you. I bought you a custom cake. I played your music. You literally framed his headshot and put it next to my birthday cake, Mom. I was proud of him. I am allowed to be proud of both of my sons, Ethan. I stared right through her. When was the last time you framed a photo of me? When was the last time you threw a party because I did something well? She didn't answer, not because she was reflecting on her actions, but because there was literally nothing for her to reference. My dad wandered in from the garage, instantly sensed the radioactive tension, and immediately pivoted toward the refrigerator like a man who suddenly realized he was dying of thirst. Classic Tom. Your Uncle Arthur called, my dad muttered, refusing to make eye contact with either of us. Said he needs to talk to you. Wants you to go down to his shop. Update 1. I called Uncle Arthur that afternoon from the safety of my bedroom. Happy belated birthday, kid. His gruff voice came through the speaker. You left before I could give you your actual present. Sorry about how that whole circus went down. Don't apologize, I said. You did the right thing walking out. That took guts, Arthur said. My uncle does not sugarcoat things, and he rarely hands out compliments. So, when he said that, I felt a knot in my chest loosen. Listen, Ethan. I need to talk to you about something serious. Can you come by the shop this Tuesday after school? What's it about? I asked. Arthur paused. He never pauses unless he is carefully weighing his next words. It's about your grandmother Margaret, and a savings account she set up for you before she passed away. My grandmother Arthur and Tom's mother died when I was 11. She was a fierce, independent woman who smelled like lavender and always had butterscotch candies in her purse. She and I were incredibly close. Much closer than she ever was with Liam, which was a fact my mother always found deeply offensive. What about it? I asked, my heart suddenly beating a little faster. Just come to the shop. Tuesday at 4, he said, and hung up. I spent Monday floating through my high school classes like a ghost. My senior year was rapidly winding down, and I was coasting through it with decent grades but absolutely zero enthusiasm. I had already been thinking heavily about what came next, and traditional college wasn't it. Not because I wasn't smart enough, but because literally no one in my family had bothered to help me prepare. By the time I realized I needed to navigate the FAFSA, SATs, and applications entirely by myself, the major deadlines had mostly passed. It was just another crucial life event that fell through the cracks when you are the permanent second priority. But I hadn't been sitting around drowning in self-pity. A few months earlier, Uncle Arthur had casually mentioned an elite apprenticeship program through the Regional Commercial Trade Association. It focused on advanced HVAC and electrical work. It was an intense 18-month training program with paid job placement. Even better, if you got accepted into the advanced track, they offered a generous relocation stipend and subsidized housing in a partner city called Oakhaven, about 3 hours north of my hometown. Arthur had deep connections in the program and had quietly written me a glowing letter of recommendation. I applied back in January without breathing a word of it to my parents. I found out I was accepted into the advanced track exactly 3 weeks before my birthday. I hadn't told anyone except Chloe. I was waiting. I wanted to announce it at my birthday party. I wanted it to be my big moment. My news. The one time I would command the family's attention and say, hey, look at this. I secured my future without a single dime or ounce of help from any of you. But then Liam got his consulting job offer, and my moment was instantly obliterated, sucked into his massive orbit like everything else in my life. Now, I was overwhelmingly glad I had kept my mouth shut. They didn't deserve to know. Tuesday after school, I drove my beat-up sedan to Arthur's shop. It's a modest, dusty building off Route 7. He was waiting in his back office with 2 cups of black coffee. He waved me in and locked the door behind me. Sit down, he ordered. I sat. He slid a thick manila folder across the scratched wooden desk. Your grandmother Margaret set up 2 high-yield savings accounts when you and Liam were little, one for each of you. It wasn't lottery money, but she put in a few $100s every single month for years. By the time she passed away, your account had exactly $12,500 in it. Liam's had the exact same amount. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the numbers. I have 12 grand? I never heard a single word about this. You wouldn't have, Arthur said grimly. She set them up through her local credit union and named your parents as the legal custodians until you each turned 18. Her specific instructions were that you'd get full access to the money when you were legally adults, to use for college, a house, or something meaningful to start your lives. Okay, I said, my hands starting to sweat. So where's my money? Do I need to go to the bank to sign something? Arthur leaned back in his heavy leather chair, and he looked older and more tired than I had ever seen him. That is the problem, Ethan. About 4 years ago, your dad came to me asking for a short-term loan for the house. I refused. But during that argument, he accidentally let it slip that your mother had consolidated the boys' education accounts. That was the word she used. Consolidated. I stopped breathing for a second. What does that mean? It means she marched into the bank, completely drained the $12,500 from your grandmother's account, and moved every single penny of it into an account exclusively under Liam's name. She used your inheritance to cover a gap in Liam's out-of-state tuition, and, Arthur clenched his jaw, to fund his month-long luxury graduation trip to Cabo last summer. I sat there in the dusty office, the silence ringing in my ears. She took my money. She took the money my dead grandmother had specifically saved for my future, and she gave it to the brother who already had everything, just so he could drink margaritas on a beach in Mexico. And my father, the man who claims to love us equally, sat by and signed the custodial release forms to let her do it. I raised absolute hell about it at the time. Arthur continued, his voice thick with disgust. I threatened to sue them on your behalf. But Tom told me it was a private family financial decision, and told me to stay the hell out of his marriage. Why are you telling me this right now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because you are 18 now. Because you just walked out of a birthday party that was designed to humiliate you. And because I think you deserve to know exactly who you are dealing with before you make any decisions about your future. He was entirely right, I did deserve to know. But here is the strangest part about finding out your own parents robbed you blind. It doesn't hit you like a sudden, explosive bomb. It hits you like quiet, depressing confirmation. It is like working on a massive, complex math equation in your head for 18 years, and finally, someone flips to the back of the textbook and shows you the answer key. The answer was exactly the horrible number you expected all along. I wasn't shocked. I was just profoundly, bone-deep exhausted. There is one more thing, Arthur said, watching my face carefully. I don't know if you can handle it today, but you need to know. Just tell me. Your mother knows about your apprenticeship in Oakhaven. My head snapped up. How? I never told her. The acceptance letter came to my email. She saw a piece of physical junk mail from the trade association with your name on it. She got suspicious, so she called my office last week trying to pry information out of my secretary. Then she called me directly, demanding to know if I was funneling you into blue-collar work. I lied to her face. I told her it was just a mass marketing brochure. I covered for you because I figured you wanted to drop the bomb on your own terms. He paused. Do you still want to tell her? I looked down at the manila folder on the desk. I thought about the $12,500 that was stolen from me. I thought about the framed photo of Liam smiling next to my birthday cake. I thought about the 18 years of being treated like a slightly annoying roommate in my own home. No, I said, my voice finally steady and hard. I don't want to tell her a damn thing. Arthur nodded slowly, a fierce glint of pride in his eyes. Good. Then let's start making a real exit plan. The next 3 weeks were the most bizarre, surreal period of my entire life, because I was actively living in 2 completely separate realities. Reality 1 was the version my family saw. Ethan goes to school. Ethan comes home. Ethan eats dinner in silence, does his chores, and doesn't start any fights. My mother acted as though the birthday party walkout was a totally closed case. She had delivered her lecture, I had absorbed my punishment, and now we could all happily move forward pretending her perfect family was intact. She was terrifyingly good at that kind of delusion. Reality 2 was the one happening in the shadows. In Arthur's back office. In Chloe's parked car, late at night. I was methodically, ruthlessly building an exit strategy. The Oakhaven apprenticeship started on June 15th. The relocation stipend from the program would cover my first and last month's rent on a shared apartment near the training center. I would be working 40 hours a week, earning a solid hourly wage, and after 18 months, I would have a master's certification and a lucrative career path that didn't rely on a single member of my toxic family. Uncle Arthur took me to a private credit union across town. I had about $4,100 saved up from 3 years of working grueling weekend shifts at a local hardware store. I had kept every dollar of it hidden in a hollowed-out dictionary in the back of my closet. It sounds utterly paranoid, but my gut had always told me never to trust my parents with my bank details. Turns out, my paranoia was just excellent intuition. Arthur sat in the lobby reading a magazine while I walked up to the teller, handed over my ID, and opened a high-yield checking and savings account entirely in my own name. When I walked out holding my shiny new debit card, Arthur smirked. "First real adult thing you've done." "Second," I corrected him. "Walking out of that dining room was the first." He actually laughed out loud at that. I started quietly purging my bedroom. I didn't pack openly, I just slowly figured out what actually mattered. I left behind all the expensive, preppy clothes my mother had bought me over the years to make me look like a respectable accessory for family Christmas cards. I kept my heavy work boots, my durable jeans, my laptop, and the vintage analog watch grandmother Margaret had given me directly, bypassing my parents. Everything that truly mattered to me fit easily into 2 faded duffel bags and a backpack. 18 years of existence in that house, and my entire life could be carried to a car in a single trip. At school, I walked into the guidance counselor's office and formally informed her I would not be attending the graduation ceremony. She looked shocked and tried to give me a speech about making memories. I cut her off. I didn't need to walk across a sweaty gymnasium stage for parents who wouldn't even be looking at me when they clapped. Chloe was my absolute anchor through all the chaos. She would come over after school, and we would sit on my bed with the door wide open, a strict rule my mother enforced for me, but somehow never bothered to enforce when Liam had girls over. Chloe helped me organize my program paperwork, helped me budget my hardware store savings, and talked me off the ledge when the anxiety of leaving everything behind made my chest tight. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this, Ethan?" she asked one afternoon, watching me quietly roll up my winter socks. "Once you do this, there is no going back. It's the nuclear option." "I'm sure," I said. "I'd rather be a nobody in a new city than a backup plan in my own house." Meanwhile, my family was operating exactly as they always did, in a frantic orbit around Liam. His start date at the consulting firm was rapidly approaching, and my mother was in full-blown production mode. She bought him 5 new custom-tailored suits. She spent hours helping him browse luxury apartments in the city center. She FaceTimed every aunt and cousin we had just to brag about his signing bonus. The entire house vibrated with the frequency of Liam's success, and I moved through the halls like a ghost, which was perfect. Ghosts don't have to explain where they are going. Liam and I had exactly one real conversation during this entire period. He wandered into the kitchen one night while I was making a turkey sandwich and casually leaned against the marble counter. "Hey," he said. "You've been super quiet lately." "I'm always quiet, Liam. Quieter than usual, I mean." He crossed his arms, looking slightly annoyed. "Is this still about the whole birthday party drama?" I slowly spread mayo on my bread, refusing to look up. "What birthday drama?" He sighed heavily. "The party, Ethan. When you threw a tantrum and walked out." "I'm over it," I said flatly. "Good," Liam said, completely missing the sarcasm. "Because Mom was really hurt by that. She put a lot of work into making that night special." I stopped making my sandwich. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and realized something profound. Liam wasn't malicious. He wasn't sitting in his room plotting to steal my inheritance or ruin my birthday. He genuinely, fundamentally did not understand the reality of our household. He had grown up standing in the blinding sunshine of our parents' adoration, and he had never once bothered to look over his shoulder to see me freezing in the shade. It wasn't evil. But it wasn't innocent, either. At a certain age, failing to notice the pain of the people around you is an active choice. "I'm fine, Liam," I said, picking up my plate. "Go plan your big city move." He smiled, looking relieved that he didn't have to deal with any heavy emotions, and walked away. 2 weeks before graduation, all my pieces were in place. My Oak Haven apartment was confirmed. My start date was locked in. My bank account was funded. And Uncle Arthur had delivered the final piece of the puzzle, a dented but mechanically flawless 2012 Chevy Colorado truck. He handed me the keys and called it a combination birthday and graduation gift. I kept it parked 3 blocks away behind a strip mall so my parents wouldn't see it. On a Tuesday afternoon, while my parents were out helping Liam shop for overpriced mid-century modern furniture for his new place, Chloe helped me carry my duffel bags out the back door and load them into the truck. We sat in the cab, eating cheap gas station tacos, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "When are you going to tell them?" she asked softly. "I'm not. Ethan, you have to leave them something." "I'll leave a letter," I said, "but I'm not doing the face-to-face conversation. I already know exactly how the script goes. Mom will cry and play the victim. Dad will stare at his shoes. Someone will call me ungrateful, and by the time the argument is over, they will somehow make it all about how I'm ruining Liam's big transition." Graduation day finally arrived. I didn't show up to the stadium. My parents obviously noticed. It's hard not to notice when they call your kid's name and nobody walks across the stage. My mom called my phone 6 times in a row. I finally answered on the 7th ring. "Ethan, where the hell are you?" she hissed, clearly whispering furiously from the bleachers. I told the school 3 weeks ago I wasn't walking, Mom. You didn't tell us. This is completely unacceptable. Your father and I are sitting here in the heat, and Liam actually took a half day off work to be here for you. I didn't ask anyone to come, Mom. That is not the point. She shrieked. That is exactly the point. I said coldly. It is never the point when it's about me. And I hung up. That night, I sat at my empty desk and wrote the letter. It took me 3 hours and a lot of crumpled paper. In the end, I kept it brutally short. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't even mention the stolen $12,500. I simply wrote that I was leaving, that I had a solid plan and was safe, and that I desperately needed space to figure out who I was without being constantly compared to Liam. I told them not to look for me. I sealed it in a blank envelope, wrote Mom and Dad on the front, and left it dead center on the kitchen island. Then, I walked out the door, got into my Chevy Colorado, and drove 3 hours north into the dark. Update 2. My parents didn't find the letter until nearly midnight. By then, I was already in Oak Haven, sitting on a cheap mattress in my new, paint-smelling apartment, splitting a pizza with my new roommate, a loud, hilarious guy named Marcus who had moved from Texas for the same apprenticeship. When Marcus asked me where I was from, I took a bite of pizza and said, "Nowhere important." It was the most honest thing I had said in 18 years. My phone exploded at exactly 12:14 a.m., 17 missed calls from Mom, 4 from Dad. I watched the notifications stack up on the screen while Marcus told me a wild story about his crazy ex-girlfriend. Then came the texts. Mom, where are you? This isn't funny, Ethan. Come home immediately. Mom, if you do not answer this phone in 5 minutes, I am calling the police and reporting you missing. I calmly typed back one message to the group chat. I am safe. I am a legal adult. I am not missing. I left a letter explaining everything. Do not call the police, because I will just tell them I left voluntarily. Please read the letter again. Mom responded instantly, that letter explains absolutely nothing. You owe this family a conversation. I powered the phone off, laid down on my bare mattress, and slept better than I had in a decade. The fallout back home was apocalyptic, exactly as I had predicted. Uncle Arthur called me 3 days later with a full sitrep. Your mother stormed into my shop yesterday looking like she was ready to commit murder. Arthur chuckled darkly. She demanded to know where you were. Accused me of kidnapping you. I told her you were a grown man who made a choice, and that I fully supported it. She called me a toxic enabler. Your dad just stood behind her looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Did they mention the letter? I asked. Oh, yeah. She called it dramatic, manipulative teenage nonsense. Because in your mother's twisted world, you setting a healthy boundary is an act of war. Leaving quietly is drama. The only acceptable behavior is for you to stay in that house and absorb her neglect with a smile. I settled into my new life in Oak Haven with a fierce, ravenous energy. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. every day. I spent 8 hours a day doing intense hands-on electrical and HVAC training, learning how to wire commercial panels and read complex blueprints. I was exhausted, filthy, and incredibly happy. Every single thing I was building belonged entirely to me. Nobody was rearranging my schedule for Liam. Nobody was ignoring my perfect test scores. Chloe and I talked every single night. The long distance was tough, but we made it work. She told me my mother was telling all the neighborhood gossips that I was going through a temporary mental health crisis and had gone on a retreat. The real climax of this story happened 4 weeks after I left. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting in my apartment in basketball shorts, studying a massive electrical code book, when someone hammered furiously on my front door. Marcus was at the gym, so I got up and swung the door open. My mother and father were standing in the hallway. My mom's face was tight, flushed with that terrifying, righteous fury she gets when she feels she has been publicly wronged. My dad stood slightly behind her, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking absolutely miserable. They had driven 3 hours. I later found out my dad had hired a cheap private investigator to track the license plate of the truck Arthur gave me. Ethan, my mother snapped, pushing past me into the apartment doorway. This little rebellion has gone on long enough. Go pack your bags. We are going home right now. I didn't move an inch. I looked at her, then looked past her at my dad, who aggressively refused to meet my eyes. No, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. Her chin started to tremble, the classic weapon she deployed when demanding authority failed. Do you have any earthly idea what you have put this family through? Your father and I have barely slept. You abandoned us. You ruined Liam's big transition month because we've been sick with worry. Even now. Even here, it was still about Liam. I stepped fully into the hallway and pulled my apartment door shut behind me so Marcus wouldn't have to deal with this if he came home. I am 18 years old, Mom. I am completely self-sufficient. I am in an elite apprenticeship program. I have a paid job placement. I have an apartment. And, I paused, letting the silence hang heavy, I have a bank account funded by my own hard work. Which is a good thing, considering the $12,500 Grandma Margaret left me was stolen to pay for Liam's tuition and his luxury vacation to Cabo. The silence that followed that sentence was so absolute, so deafening, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the hallway. My dad closed his eyes and let out a ragged, defeated sigh. My mother's face drained of all color, turning a sickly, chalky white. In that dingy hallway, 3 hours from the house I grew up in, I watched the horrifying realization wash over both of my parents. I knew everything. I hadn't just left because of a birthday cake, I knew about the betrayal. My mother, true to form, recovered first. When caught doing something completely indefensible, Brenda's instinct is to immediately go on the offensive. That money was a private family financial decision. She stammered, her voice shrill and defensive. Liam's tuition had a massive gap. We used the available resources to help him succeed. We would have done the exact same thing for you if you needed it. But you didn't. I fired back, my voice echoing off the cheap drywall. Because there was nothing left for me. You drained my account to zero. You stole money my dead grandmother explicitly left for my future, and you gave it to the son who already had everything, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me. We fully planned to pay it back, she cried out. When? I yelled, finally losing my temper. It has been 4 years. You had money to buy Liam 5 custom suits last month, but you couldn't put a single dollar back into my account? She looked frantically at my dad. The look clearly said, help me control him. But Tom didn't help her. For the very first time in my entire life, my father didn't run to the garage. He pulled his hands out of his pockets, looked at my mother, and said, shut up, Brenda. Just shut up. My mom gasped, clutching her pearls like a 1950s housewife. Tom. He's right, my dad said, his voice cracking, tears suddenly pooling in his eyes. He looked at me, and he looked utterly broken. Ethan is right. We stole from him. We failed him. I let you talk me into signing those transfer papers, and I have felt like a coward every single day since. My mother looked like she had been physically slapped. We did what was best for the family. She shrieked. No, I said quietly, the anger suddenly draining out of me, leaving only cold resolve. You did what was best for Liam. You always do what is best for Liam. That's why I left. I'm not running away. I am building a life where I don't have to constantly shrink myself so Liam can take up all the oxygen in the room. I am never coming back to that house. My mother started sobbing real, ugly tears this time, but I didn't feel the old, conditioned urge to comfort her. I just felt tired. We should go, my dad said softly. He reached out and awkwardly grabbed my mother's arm, pulling her gently toward the elevator. She was weeping hysterically, babbling about how I was tearing the family apart. Before the elevator doors closed, my dad looked back at me. I am so sorry, Ethan, I am so damn proud of the man you are. I should have told you that 10 years ago. Then, the doors slid shut. I stood in the hallway for 5 full minutes, letting the adrenaline metabolize. Then I went back inside, sat on the couch, and called Uncle Arthur to tell him what happened. He just listened, grunted in approval, and said, "'Bout damn time Tom grew a spine." That was 6 months ago. The aftermath of that hallway confrontation completely shattered the dynamic of my family, and the twists just kept coming. 2 weeks after they ambushed me in Oak Haven, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. Inside was a cashier's check from my dad for $15,000. It was the original $12,500, plus an extra $2,500 to cover what the interest would have been over the last 4 years. I found out later that Tom had quietly sold his prized vintage motorcycle, the one he had been restoring in the garage for a decade, to get the cash without my mother knowing. But the biggest shock came from Liam. Apparently, the car ride home from Oak Haven was a bloodbath. My dad finally snapped and laid out exactly what they had done to me, right in front of Liam when they got back. When Liam found out that his tuition gap and his spring break trip to Cabo were entirely funded by my stolen inheritance, he completely lost his mind. For all of Liam's oblivious golden child syndrome, he actually has a conscience. He was horrified. He called me in tears, apologizing profusely, swearing on his life he had absolutely no idea where that money had come from. He told me he always assumed mom and dad just had extra savings. I believed him. The beneficiary of favoritism rarely looks at the ledger. But Liam didn't just apologize to me. He took action. He sat my mother down and told her he was utterly disgusted by her behavior. He told her that her toxic obsession with his success had driven his brother out of the family. He packed up the expensive apartment she had helped him decorate, moved into a smaller place closer to his job, and formally cut her off. He told Brenda she was not allowed to visit him, call him, or be part of his life until she checked herself into intensive, long-term therapy to figure out why she treated me like garbage. So, now, Brenda sits alone in that big, quiet house. Her scapegoat ran away and built a successful life without her. Her golden child, the masterpiece she sacrificed my childhood to build, rejected her because of her own cruelty. My dad is currently living in a rented apartment across town, figuring out if he even wants to stay married to a woman who could do that to her own son. As for me, I am thriving. I am at the top of my apprenticeship class. I have $15,000 sitting securely in a bank account that only I control. Chloe is moving to Oakhaven next month to start community college, and we are looking at bigger apartments together. I didn't have to scream, or burn the house down, or ruin anyone's life to get my revenge. I just walked away, told the absolute truth, and let the house of cards they built collapse under its own weight. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching.